Welcome to the S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We're working our way through the book of Exodus because we just started last time.
We did.
We are not very far into it at all.
We're fresh into it. Yeah, so last week started a brand new book. And we covered a lot last week. The birth of Moses, his exile into a foreign country, God tasking Moses, I got a job for you, and Moses actually starting it, right? So Moses' job is to take God's people back to the promised land.
Yeah.
It's like, woo, yay.
We're more than 300 years into the book already.
Yeah.
And we're starting with chapter 5.
Yeah, right. Well, we ended Genesis with a group of 70 people finding rescue in Egypt.
Yeah.
And now we're finding that there's probably 1 million slaves.
Yeah.
Right. So this ragtag group of 70 is now 1 million people.
Yeah, possibly even 2 million. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. By the
time
time
we get a census later.
Yeah, by the time we get to Numbers, which really isn't much after Exodus, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because where we are in Exodus now, there's only about a year or so left in the book, maybe a year and a half left in the book.
It's funny. Right. Yeah.
We've been through 300 some odd years already. There's only about a year. I mean, the rest of the book, it lasts for maybe 15 or 18 months.
Right.
And then we get to the first census in Numbers. And yeah, we're probably 2.5 million people by that point. So, that's quite the expansion.
Yeah. So one last thing from last week. One thing we noticed was Moses spent a lot of time trying to get out of his job. Forgot to mention that because we're going to see some more of that this week.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not going to stop.
Right. All right. So chapter 5, Moses and his brother Aaron, they go to see Pharaoh. And they said exactly what God told them to say. You know, God is telling them what to do. And he says first, the first ask is that the people, the Israelites, they need to be released because they want to go on what they're calling a pilgrimage feast.
Yeah.
And this seems to be it's not a party, but it's a 3-day excursion into the wilderness, having the feast. I assume that's going to be a couple days to do that, and then 3 days back.
Yeah.
And that's the ask.
Yeah.
All right. So Pharaoh, who considers himself a god, is like, I don't know your God. You're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And kind of deflates the bubble right away, right?
Yeah, let me point something out here because this is really going to be important as we do our reading through this entire section, really the whole book. So verse 2, but Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him by releasing? I do not know the Lord." So most of our Bible translations are going to say the Lord, right? You know, small capitals or
sometimes it's
letters
italicized. Sometimes it just looks different.
Yeah. So here's the thing. That is a respectful way of translating. It's not a translation at all. It's just a respectful way of putting God's name, Jehovah. Okay. But when we read it in English, we think of the Lord as a title, which it is. I mean, it's a title. We think of it as a title, and so we're thinking of it actually as a little bit of a disconnect from what he's really saying. Moses and Aaron came in and said, "The true God, Jehovah, says this." And Pharaoh says, "I don't know Jehovah. He's not any of the gods on my list." Right. So they are actually calling God by name all the way through here. But most of our English translations are going to miss that. So when he says he's
that's
not
kind of
just
one of those footnotes that's in the front, right?
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah. He's not just saying, "Well, I don't know God," or "I don't know your God," or "I don't know the Lord." He's actually by name saying, "He means nothing to me. I don't know Jehovah." Right. So we have that when you're reading this, make sure that you put that in there because you can actually it actually ramps up the discussion as far as what's going on every time you see that.
Right. So Pharaoh actually kind of gets ticked off at this, and he's saying, "Oh, these Hebrews are lazy, so we're going to increase their work." So now Israel has to get their own straw for making the bricks, and it doesn't sound like much, but this is extra work that they have to do. They have to go out to find it, they have to cut it, they have to bring it back, and their quota has to remain the same.
Yeah, they're not allowed to drop off what they're normally doing. Yeah,
right. So the Israelites workers, they blame Moses and Aaron for the pain, right? If you guys didn't show up, this wouldn't have happened. This is all your fault.
That's going to be also a recurring theme as
Yeah,
we go.
right.
It's always Moses' fault. Everything is Moses' fault.
So Moses in turn blames God.
That's right.
Why did you make the trouble for this people? And it's intentionally I put red in this. Moses is like, these are my people.
These aren't my people anymore.
Why did you send me? He's lamenting.
Yep.
So God says to Moses, now you're going to see what I'm going to be able to do with Pharaoh. He's going to be compelled by my strong hand, and I'm going to lead him, and he's going to release my people. And by his hand, he is actually going to drive them out of this land, which is kind of a cool thing. And I love how God tells Moses what's going to happen. Even there's a lot of details left out.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely not giving all the details, but
well, Moses would leave. So God reminds Moses
to do that anyway.
God reminds Moses that he's the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and Jacob, and he remembers the land covenant that he gave to the Israelites, and he's going to bring them into the land.
Yep.
And Moses told the Israelites the same thing. So he met with the Israelites. Here's what's going to happen. They didn't believe him at all. And all they said was, look, all we know is you show up, I got more pain.
It's been 400 plus years that they've been in Egypt. They've been slaves for more than 200 of those years. God has obviously forgotten about them.
Yeah,
right?
From their point of view.
From their point of view,
Yeah,
right? And so Moses shows up, the same Moses who disappeared for 40 years, right? He killed the Egyptian.
Who was never really a Hebrew.
Yeah. I mean, he grew up in the palace and all this. So, and then he killed the Egyptian, got yelled at by a couple of these Hebrews, these Israelites, and he ran away for 40 years. And now he shows up and says, God spoke to me. Right. It's like, would you believe him?
Yeah, no. I'm right with you. So Moses tells God, look, if the nation of Israel is not going to listen to me, Pharaoh's not going to listen to me.
Yeah.
And then especially because I speak with difficulty. So there's that little thing is in there a couple times.
Yeah.
Maybe a speech impediment.
It could be a speech impediment. It could be that he is just not confident in his public speaking. I mean, he was trained in all the literature and all the wisdom of Egypt, but I mean, it just may not have been
there's something there. That's also why he wanted his brother there too, or one of the reasons he gave for his brother. And
God said, fine. Basically, Aaron will be your spokesman, and we'll see this in the next chapter over. Aaron will be your spokesman. You'll be the boss, and you'll just tell him what to do, and he'll sort of do it.
Right. So all along, and especially now, Moses seems to think that God doesn't have a role to play. Right, he doesn't have a piece of this. Right, he feels like it's all on his shoulders. How am I going to accomplish this? How am I going to do this?
Yep.
Versus, I got God on my side. Maybe a little trust. He can figure it out. Not that we in nowadays ever do that.
Oh no, of course not.
But
we got
a little hindsight here.
What's interesting is that is going to plague him throughout as we read Exodus, and then if you were to continue Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, you'll actually see that insecurity or that theme running throughout Moses' life, even as they're wandering for the next 40 years in the wilderness. When they complain to him, it's not very rarely is he going to stand up, hey, let's trust God, whatever. Right. He just sort of turns it around and complains to God. Oh, they're whatever. God is the one who has to keep reminding him, hello.
Right.
And when he makes his big fatal mistake, the one that keeps him out of the land of Canaan, it's specifically because he didn't trust God.
Right.
So
finally had enough after.
Yeah. I mean, and he blew
years.
up, and there was a lot of sort of good reasoning behind it. It was still the wrong thing to do, and he paid the consequences for it. But when God approached him about it, he said, "You did not trust me."
Yeah.
Right. So this is like the theme all the way through.
So I see a couple other interesting things with Moses also. He's starting to have a real relationship with God. So here at Oak Tree, we have this thing called the Path. It's personal discipleship. He's living it, right? Which is kind of awesome, and very few people have this.
I don't think he's all in quite yet.
Well, exactly, but he's asking questions.
Yeah.
He's learning to trust God, and he's not quite all there yet,
no,
and he's not. But second, God made covenants with Abraham. And Abraham never saw the fruits of those covenants.
Right.
So far, I think I got them both right. There's two things that Moses is going to see. Right, he's going to see God taking them out of Israel.
Yep.
And like you said,
out
he doesn't.
of Egypt, yeah.
Or out of Egypt. He's not going to quite see the into Israel side of it.
Right.
But he's also going to see his people, the Israelites at Mount Sinai, serve God for a good year.
Yeah.
And God has already kind of foreshadowed that. So
Yeah.
there's two things that God said that are going to at least happen within his lifetime.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's realizing some things that, like you said, God had promised. We're talking almost 500 years before this is when God was working with Abraham. And it's been
a day.
About 500 years. It's been a long time. So, yeah.
Okay, so the middle of this chapter, we get an ancestry lesson,
Which out of the blue.
Well, so it really seems out of place, and when something seems out of place, it's your job to figure out, why is this out of place? What did I miss?
Yeah,
right?
why is this here?
Right? So the job is to figure it out. So we see they start with the ancestry, and we see the offspring of Reuben, and that makes sense. He's the first.
He's the oldest, right?
And then we see Simeon, and it's like, okay, that makes sense. And then we see Levi. Okay, we're just going down the order.
Yeah.
And then we stick with Levi.
For
a ways.
the rest of the chapter.
Yeah. So we see Levi's children, and we see the grandchildren, and we see the great-grandchildren, and then we finally see it. And at the great-grandchildren level, we see Aaron and Moses.
Yeah.
So now we know that Aaron and Moses can trace their roots back to Levi. We know from other places in the Bible that all the priests are going to come from Levi. The rest of the Levites provide a supporting function to the priests and the temple and do that type of work. So it's kind of cool that it's in there.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that we don't. I mean, we don't have a priestly structure yet. We don't have the sacrificial system. None of that has been given yet. Aaron will be the first high priest, and all the priests will have to come down through Aaron's family.
Right.
But sometimes we forget Moses was also a Levite. Right. Miriam, their older sister, because they have an older sister, was also a Levite, and the Levite tribe were the ones who stood and ministered between God and the people, which is exactly what Moses and Aaron are doing
starting
right
out
here.
doing it. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So that's why it's in there.
That's why it's in there, yeah.
We're going to end with chapter 7, I think, this week, and we find out how old Moses and Aaron are. So during this time, Moses is 80, Aaron is 83, and like you said, he spent the first 40 years really being in Pharaoh's land, and he spent the next 40 hiding from Pharaoh and everybody else,
being a shepherd out in Midian,
right? And now he's back at age 80.
So he's 80, and he's the youngest, right? So Aaron is 83. Miriam, we don't know how old. I don't remember how old. I don't remember if we know. There we go. How old she was, but she's older than Aaron.
Yeah, both of them. And she was also old enough to be able to talk and at least reason when Moses was put in the water to begin with.
Because she was watching him and talk to
7,
Pharaoh's
10
daughter.
at the youngest. But
Yeah. So she could be as old as, maybe late 80s or 90 by this point.
Yeah. God restates what's going to happen at Moses and Aaron's meeting. He also says that to Pharaoh, and you brought this up, Moses is going to be like God, and Aaron's going to be like the spokesperson or the prophet.
Yeah.
And so not that Aaron is God, not that Moses is God, but the relationship is like that.
Yeah.
Right? Like that, like the head or the boss.
Yeah.
And to Pharaoh, it's almost a one-to-one relationship. Pharaoh considers himself a god. Moses is the counterpart.
Right. Had Moses gone directly to Pharaoh and said, God says this and I'm just a prophet, Pharaoh's like, you're just a prophet. Right? So God set it up in such a way that Moses was talking head to head, and then let somebody else, and he didn't really do the talking, right, as much because Aaron was the prophet, but Moses was standing there almost like the God, right?
Yeah.
And Aaron said, "This is what he said." You can almost see, Moses looking at Aaron, which is his older brother, which is interesting. Moses looking at Aaron and going, and Aaron does his thing, right? So there's a visual that Pharaoh sees too.
Yeah, right. Where Moses is in charge. That's key too.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so Moses, of course, he has to accurately pass along what God tells him, but Pharaoh's not going to believe.
Yeah.
And Pharaoh and God will harden Pharaoh's heart. And you talked about this last week. You said something along the lines, Pharaoh's going to start out hardening his own heart.
Yeah.
Then God will harden Pharaoh's heart. So we need to be on the lookout for that too.
Yeah, and we'll see that more next week as we get into
but it's coming up
more,
like,
but it is coming up very quickly. Yeah.
And then God also says he's doing this so the Egyptians will know that God is Lord.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Later on, he lists a couple other reasons why he's doing it too, but this is the reason for now.
Yep.
So Moses does everything God asks. Moses tells Aaron to throw down his staff. It turns into a snake, ooh. And then Pharaoh calls his wise men. I'll do my best to call them magicians from now on, and that translates it as magicians. The magicians do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So Pharaoh's like, nothing that a man can't do.
Yeah.
And he starts to harden his own heart.
Well, so we've got three levels. Okay, so we've already talked about the Moses and the Pharaoh thing head to head.
Right.
Moses and Pharaoh aren't throwing sticks down.
Yeah, right. That's not for them to do.
No. That's not. They're looking at each other eye to eye, and they're telling their people. Right. My people talk to your people, type thing. And Moses looks at Aaron, gives him a little nod or whatever, and Aaron throws it down.
You should make a movie out of that.
So let it be written, so let it be done.
I thought I'd say it though.
So Moses looks at, or Pharaoh looks at his guys, and he gives them the same nod, right?
Exactly.
And they throw their sticks down. And so there's this tension in the room, right? There's this, it's a standoff almost, right?
Right, it is.
And they're looking at each other, but what's actually happening is not at the Aaron magician level, and it's not really at the Moses and Pharaoh level. It's really happening at the God and Satan level. Okay? Because what we'll see over the course of this is we know where Aaron got the power or who was doing it for, but who's doing it for these wise men, these magicians?
Right. Where are they getting it? Right.
This is
I think they call it
power.
Ancient art.
Yeah, secret arts or dark arts or dark magic, depending on your translation. This is all demonic power. This is either Satan himself or demons doing this. This is a spiritual warfare on display in the physical world. Yeah. Right. This is God against the gods.
Think about.
As we're seeing this, and each one of the plagues, and we'll talk about this next time, but each one of the plagues actually addresses, as we'll see tonight even, each one of the plagues addresses or attacks one Egyptian god or a set of Egyptian gods. So
in this case, Aaron's staff swallows their snake staff. Well, so 1-0 us, right? Maybe, but Pharaoh's heart was hardened.
Yeah, but notice verse 14. The Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hard. He didn't say, I have hardened it, I have pushed it. He was watching the whole thing, and he just, nope, I'm not interested. He did it to himself, right?
Right. So we move on to the first plague.
Yeah.
Moses tells God that Pharaoh's heart is hardened. God tells him to go back in the morning. When Pharaoh goes out to the Nile, put yourself in place so he has to stop. And at that time, he tells him what to say, and you're going to hear this maybe 10 times. Release my people that they may serve me in the wilderness. But since you haven't done that, I'm going to strike the Nile and turn it into blood. Yep. Moses says that and tells Aaron to do the same, or Moses does it too and Aaron does it too.
Yeah.
In this case. Interestingly enough, the Pharaoh's magicians do the same thing.
Which there are certain of these that I'm like, why would you want to do that? I mean, okay, fine, you
Right.
can turn your staves.
Well, there's a lot we
into-
don't know. Does it all of a sudden go back, and then the magicians change it again? You know,
That one's interesting, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
because the Nile, the little tributaries off the Nile that goes into their reservoirs, all drinking water,
right.
but they're going to find water that hasn't been turned into blood, right? Now, there are some people, every year in Egypt, there is a very natural phenomenon where silt comes up through the Nile River, and it does actually turn it sort of a reddish, like a blood reddish color.
Right.
And so there are a lot of people who say, well, this was
Just that time
it's
of
just
year.
that time of year. It's a very natural. It wasn't really blood. It was just this. The difference is that when that happens, it doesn't kill all the fish. It is still drinkable.
Right.
Right? It's the color's different, but they can
But it's
filter
just
it out.
color.
But it's just that's not what happened here, right? This made it completely undrinkable. All the fish die, type of thing. So you can't. Well, this is just the natural phenomenon that Moses used to trick Pharaoh, right?
Right.
You can't do that.
Right. So Pharaoh's heart remains hard. He left without letting the slaves go. Now, what I find interesting here is Pharaoh wanted to get rid of the Israelites to begin with. Yeah. Right? Because they were a threat to Egypt, and maybe it was a different Pharaoh. But he had them enslaved instead, and because it was so long ago, would have been a different Pharaoh. But now it's switched. Right? The Israelites want to leave, and Pharaoh's like, nope, not going to let you go.
Well, it's the slave labor, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That they're now dependent upon.
Yeah, as long as they aren't in the position to raise up an army,
Right. Yeah, we got you.
it's free labor.
Right.
Why would you want to do that, right?
Yeah. So meanwhile, we have all the fish are dead. They're beginning to smell. The Egyptians have no water to drink, so they have no choice. They start digging their own wells.
Yeah, and so they dig wells near the river, and
Right.
water comes up.
Right.
They get real water.
Right.
So
So-
God,
Yeah.
didn't.
So this isn't we're trying to kill people. It's
Right.
we're trying to get Pharaoh's attention.
Right. And again, when we notch it up to the top level, there are several. I mean, the Nile is the lifeblood. Interesting phrase. It is the lifeblood of Egypt,
Right. And growing crops and
everything.
Right.
And in their mythology, I'll call it mythology, their gods. There are several gods that are connected to the Nile River, and it's actually called. I was doing some reading. It's actually called the blood of one of the gods. And so there's, when we read this, 4,000, 3,000, 3,500 years removed, if we're not understanding what the Egyptians saw, this is part of the historical context, right?
Right.
What the Egyptians saw and heard was more than just, the water turned to blood. This is an attack on at least three of their gods. This was a major, major issue, right? And the Pharaoh knew that. And so he knew that it was a God versus God battle.
Right.
And Moses knew that. We sort of miss that sometimes. So that's sort of our job as we're bringing that out, is because we want you to see that. This is not just, it's turned to blood and then, it comes back.
Right. That's the end of this week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're moving. We're certainly slowing down, like you said we would do. So we covered the first plague.
Yeah. Next time we'll go through several more of them because they're in sort of a quick succession.
Right.
But yeah, this sets it up, and we're at war now.
We're moving. Yeah.
we're at war. So hopefully you find this interesting and you can see some of the stuff that's really going on here. If you'd like more information about what to read, you say, hey, where can I find more information about the battles going on there? Write a comment or ask us, and we'd be happy to share some of that stuff with you. Anything else you see, make sure you share that as well. And we will pick up here next time with Chapter 8 and Plague number 2. See you then.
Bye, everyone.